Now, as Parliament continues to hold oral hearings to allow for the expropriation of land, concerns have been raised about possible abuses of power. According to a recent report by the Auditor General, the eviction of farmers by rogue government officials has resulted in claims amounting to more than 2 billion rand. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Rosalie Kingwell, a research associate at the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies, as well as Mr. Vuyani Zikana, a farmer who has been evicted. A very good afternoon to the both of you and welcome to the Daytime Update. Let me start with you, Dr. Rosalie. In November of 2020, we heard Minister Thoko Didiza saying that those who are occupying state-owned land as farmers need not worry, they need not panic, they need not fear, because what government wants to do is to give them occupation rights to the land. But from the research that we have found and from the report by the Auditor General, this does not always seem to be the case. Why is it that some farmers are being evicted from land that was previously said they were going to be getting occupation rights for?
Hello to the listeners. Thank you for this opportunity. Yes, indeed, you know, the problem here seems to be that the idea of redistribution that was really the key idea in the 2020 statements has become mixed up now with a new policy for leasing state land. And the latter is now, you know, being seen as a kind of mix of redistribution and encouraging farming. But in actual fact, you can never ever use state leasing of state land as a substitute for redistribution. But the two concepts have now become muddied. And now we have a situation where superimposed on top of the 2020 policy statement is a new state leasing policy where 700,000 hectares was advertised, and the department has no functionality, no adjudication system for adjudicating the rights of the current occupiers and current lessees, almost all of whom have some kind of rights. The real problem, as you say, is one of abuse of power, because if the land administration and land governance system is not working, you're not going to have transparency, and people can abuse the power that they have to throw people off the land.
But what I'm hearing you say as well, Dr. Kingwell, and if you'll correct me here, is that there seems to be a level of confusion because there are 3 land reform systems that seem to be running concurrently. Is that what you're saying, that it's then difficult to differentiate which one should be applicable in any one particular situation?
Yes, indeed, that is what I'm hinting at. That the new state leasing policy is really, it's being kind of bandied as a kind of form of redistribution, but trying to combine it with encouraging farmers. So they were supposedly at a system for adjudicating who would be the best farmers to take over these leases. But this is in complete contradiction to the existing rights of the people who are already on that land. We have a host of land laws that protect people who are already on the land. And there was no system put in place for first adjudicating those rights, whether they are currently seized like Mr. Zikana, or former farm workers' children, or former farm workers who have beneficial occupation rights. So we just don't have a system in place to adjudicate the various rights, and there's been a mudding of the waters between different programs.
And let's bring you in here, Mr. Zikana. You were one of those farmers who was unlawfully evicted or removed from his land. Tell us your story. Mr. Zikana, are you still with us? All right, we seem to have lost Mr. Zikana there. Mr. Zikana, are you with us? All right, we seem to have lost Mr. Zikana, but we'll try and reconnect with that particular line. So tell us as well, Dr. Kingwell, about the quote-unquote rogue officials that are found within the Department of Land Reform and Agriculture, and the work that they've been doing as far as removing people from their land.
Could you repeat the question? Are you asking about the people, the rogue officials?
Yes.
Yes, well, I'm not, you know, I'm not au fait with all the latest documentation about it, but from what I've seen is that, that the department is basically conceding that some people are acting outside of their mandate. And the cases, like Mr. Zigana's case, has actually gone through a long investigation process into potential corruption. I'm not sure exactly he would be able to tell us the outcome of that. But it does seem that they are conceding that some people have acted outside of their mandates. In other words, they've abused power. In other words, there are hints of corruption here. Because, as I said, we don't have a system that is corruption-proof free. So, or corruption-free proof, rather. So it is a systemic problem. And it obviously, it's surfacing through various cases like Mr. Zigana, but there are many, many other cases where it's surfacing.
And we'll certainly... And we'll certainly find out from Mr. Zigana when he does join us. But you say that this is a systemic problem. What are the possible solutions that can be put on the table in order to redress the problems that we have, and also balance the need for land redress and also the rights of those who are already occupying the land? Yeah.
So firstly, we need a coherent land redistribution program. You know, this state leasing is not going to substitute for the failure to having put in place a good redistribution policy. And lots of specialists, you know, have put forward all sorts of proposals for how this can be done better. So that's the first thing. We need the redistribution policy and program in place. And this should not be seen as a substitute for that. On the other side of things, we have a major problem with the broken land administration system, particularly the fragmented land information systems. Our data systems are fragmented between thousands of different data sets, and they don't talk to each other. So the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And what I've been proposing is that we must have an adjudication act. And that means not a court judicial process, but an administrative process whereby rights of existing occupiers and rights holders can be adjudicated vis-a-vis each other, so that you would never have this case where of overlapping, where someone plonks himself or herself on top of somebody else's land. We first have to work through the adjudication of existing rights, and that has not been done. So apart from these prominent cases like Mr. Zigana's case, we have millions of former farm workers who have rights on the state land. This land was expropriated 4 decades ago from white farmers by the apartheid government. It wasn't land acquired by the post-apartheid government for redistribution. It was the apartheid government that expropriated this land. And the former farm workers who were living there have since become farmers in their own rights. They've started farming all sorts of things, mainly livestock, and they have beneficial occupation rights. So these few cases that are bubbling now are the tip of the iceberg. The entire fabric of this policy is going to come undone. Now, because there are numerous other cases as well.
Dr. King, there are instances where, as you've mentioned, there are then 2 people who are making claim to the land. The first being the one that was already farming and making a living from that land, and the second being those who are coming in from these new restructured policies. How have these impasses been resolved? Have people been moving out of their lands? How has resolution and restitution then been found in those particular situations?
Well, very often there hasn't been a resolution. There's just simmering disputes, simmering contestation. They often are not resolved, which is why people have to go to the courts. And, you know, my argument is we need a land administration system to adjudicate rights. The courts should be the last resort. because we have such a poor system to adjudicate the relative rights of those who are on the land and those who might be claiming it on top of them. Sometimes it's a restitution claim on top of occupiers. So because there's no system in place to do these proper adjudication administratively, people end up having to go through the courts, and that is a very, very, very expensive process, as you know. And there is this figure that the cumulative total for all the different cases that are being made against the department come to 2 billion, about 2 billion. This is across all the different programs. So there's discontent, simmering disputes all over the place.
Certainly the issue of land still a very primary one. We'll leave our conversation at that for this afternoon, Dr. Kingwell, but thank you very much for the insight gleaned from our conversation. That's Dr. Rosalie Kingwell there, and she's the independent critical consultant researcher, and she's with the Institute for Poverty, Land and Agrarian Studies. Certainly quite clear.